Planet Reddit, today's story is...
My husband and his ex-wife cheated on me while I was looking after their sick daughter in hospital, but when his grandfather found out, he made a decision that changed everything. I have no idea how to start this. I suppose I could say that it all began when I thought that marrying my husband was the best decision I had ever made. I was completely wrong, incredibly wrong. I'm still trying to understand how things got so out of hand. Maybe by writing this I can understand it better. We've been married for almost 4 years. He had a daughter from a previous marriage, Lexi, an intelligent and affectionate girl who had experienced much more suffering than any child should have to endure. Her parents had a complicated divorce, and her mother, my husband's ex-wife, was still very much present in their lives. At first, I didn't think too much of it. They were raising their daughter together, and I assumed that was part of the deal. I didn't mind taking on the role of stepmother. In fact, I was excited by the idea. However, things were never as simple as they seemed. His ex-wife, let's call her Mia, was much more involved in his life than I initially realized. There were constant text messages, phone calls, and surprise visits. My husband, let's call him Rick, minimized it by saying it was all for their daughter, and honestly, I believed him. Co-parenting requires constant communication, right? Besides, I didn't want to be the typical jealous second wife, so I let a lot of things slide. I should have noticed the cracks earlier. There were strange moments, like when he would always jump to Mia's defense no matter the situation. If I even mentioned feeling uncomfortable because she was pushing the boundaries, he made me feel like I was overreacting or insecure. Once, she showed up at our house late at night because her car had broken down, and he didn't even ask me if it was okay for her to stay. I felt bad about it, but I didn't say anything. I didn't want to be that kind of wife. Things came to a head at the beginning of this year. Their daughter, Lexi, started showing symptoms of something serious. She had no energy, was losing weight, and complaining of pain. Rick and I took her to the doctor, and after numerous tests, we ended up in the hospital. Lexi was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease that would require immediate treatment and a long hospital stay. It was devastating for all of us, but especially for her. I devoted myself completely to helping Lexi. I stayed by her side in the hospital, coordinated with the doctors, and kept a detailed record of her treatment plan. Rick was also there, at least for the first week. Then work emergencies started to crop up. He would be gone for hours, sometimes all day, while I stayed with Lexi. He claimed he was trying to keep everything in order at work, so we wouldn't have to worry about the finances. I believed him. One night, I needed to pick up a few things from home. I hadn't been back in days and thought I could take a shower and change my clothes. When I entered, the house was dark except for the light coming from our room. I wasn't prepared for what I saw when I opened the door. There they were, Rick and Mia, cuddling intimately in our bed. My own bed. I was paralyzed. For a moment, I couldn't even process what I was seeing. Then Rick noticed me, and the expression on his face will haunt me forever. He didn't even seem to feel guilty, just aware that he had been discovered. Mia had the audacity to smile with superiority, as if she had won some kind of twisted competition. I turned and left without saying a word. I drove back to the hospital with a mind full of questions. How long had this been going on? Was this the real reason for all her work emergencies? Was I just a temporary replacement while they fixed their problems? The next morning, Rick showed up at the hospital as if nothing had happened. I couldn't even look at him. I kept my attention on Lexi, who didn't need to witness the tension between us. Later that night, he sent me a message saying we needed to talk. I told him I wasn't ready, but he insisted. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at the house. That's when he dropped the bombshell. He and Mia wanted me to leave, to abandon my own home. He said they were going to rebuild their family for Lexi's sake, and that it would be better if I wasn't in the picture. Here's the thing. The house wasn't just his. When we bought it, I used some of the inheritance I got from my parents to make the down payment. My name was on the deed along with his. Legally, he couldn't just kick me out. I made that very clear. He didn't take it well. He started yelling, calling me selfish and vindictive. He said I was standing in the way of his happiness and ruining Lexi's chance of having a stable family, especially when she was in such a delicate condition. I replied that that was ironic coming from someone who had just destroyed the stability of his own daughter by having a secret relationship with her mother. After that, everything spiraled completely out of control. Rick started bad-mouthing me to anyone who would listen, making up this wild narrative about me being a bitter, evil stepmother who wanted to destroy his family. Honestly, it hurt to hear that, especially because I had done everything I could for his daughter, Lexi. She has always been like my own child, and I have never treated her as anything less. But Rick, being the charmer that he is, knew how to play the victim. He painted this picture of himself as the loving father who was just trying to bring his family together while I was supposedly the villain who stood in the way. It was like watching a soap opera, except it was my life, and it wasn't entertaining. The truth is that not everyone believed his sob story. While many people in his family seemed to fall for his act, there was one person who did not. His grandfather, George. George has always been a pragmatic guy. He's old school, the kind of person who believes in principles like loyalty, integrity, and responsibility. He is not easily swayed by emotional manipulation and definitely does not tolerate dishonesty. I always had a lot of respect for him, but I never expected him to step in like he did. When George found out what Rick had done, cheating, lying, and trying to kick me out of the house, he was furious. When I say furious, I mean furious. He didn't just silently disapprove, he took action. To my surprise, George actually called me personally. I admit that when I saw his name appear on my phone, I hesitated. I thought it was going to be another lesson, or someone else telling me to give up and let Rick and his wife play happy families. But it wasn't like that at all. George told me he was disgusted by Rick's behavior. He said it went against everything he stood for, and that he would not tolerate it in his family. His exact words were something like, "A man who treats his wife and daughter like that doesn't deserve to be called part of his family." Honestly, I was speechless. I wasn't expecting anyone from Rick's family to take my side, much less George, who is a kind of patriarch of the whole clan. But it didn't stop there. This is where things took a turn. George controls a family trust, a fairly considerable sum of money that Rick has been counting on for years. This trust was supposed to be his golden ticket, enough to secure his life. George told me that he had made the decision to exclude Rick from the trust completely. He said that Rick's actions had shown that he didn't deserve the privileges that came with the family name. My jaw practically touched the floor. I didn't ask for this, and honestly it hadn't even crossed my mind, but I can't say that I disagree with his decision. Actions have consequences, and Rick was finally facing his. Of course, when Rick found out, he completely lost control. He showed up at the house again, this time even angrier than before. He was shouting, calling me every name in the book and accusing me of turning his family against him. According to Rick, I had manipulated George into excluding him, as if I had that kind of power. I told him straight that he had managed to ruin his own life all by himself, without any help from me. He didn't take it well. He stormed out, slamming the door, so hard I thought the hinges might break. That was the last time I saw him in person. Now I'm here, going over everything in my head, wondering what else I could have done to avoid this disaster. Should I have confronted Rick sooner, when I suspected something wasn't right? Should I have been stricter about setting boundaries with Mia? Maybe I missed the signs, or maybe I chose to ignore them because I didn't want to believe that the person I married could be capable of all this. I keep thinking about Lexi too. She's caught in the middle of all this, and I hate that she might be the one who suffers the most. Did I fail her by not fighting harder to keep things stable? Or was this chaos inevitable? No matter what I did, it's hard not to question every decision I made along the way. Update 1. Hi everyone. I wish I could say things have improved, but they've only gotten worse. Honestly, I don't even know where to start because it seems like every part of my life is falling apart. After I refused to leave the house, Rick decided to tell his side of the story to anyone who would listen, including my family and his. And surprise, his version conveniently casts him as the hero and me as the villain. The messages started coming in a couple of days ago. First, it was from his sister, telling me I should do the right thing and let Rick and Mia rebuild their family. Then his mother weighed in saying I was being selfish and clinging to something that wasn't mine. I even got a message from one of my own cousins, someone I haven't spoken to in years, telling me I needed to step aside for the sake of the child. It didn't take me long to figure out what was going on. Rick is using Lexi as bait. From the messages, it's clear that he's making up some story about how I've been a horrible stepmother. Someone who doesn't care about Lexi's well-being and who stands in the way of her having a stable family. The nerve of it is astounding. I have done nothing but love and care for that little girl since the day I met her. For him to turn around and use her as a weapon against me is beyond cruel. The worst part is that I can't even see Lexi. Every time I go to the hospital, there's always a relative of Rick or Mia there to block me. They're acting like I'm some kind of intruder, as if I have no right to be there. A few days ago, I tried to visit her after work. I brought her a little stuffed animal she'd been asking for, hoping to spend a few minutes with her. But when I got to her room, Mia's brother was there. He told me straight out that I wasn't welcome and that I needed to leave. I didn't want to cause a scene in front of Lexi, so I left, but I felt like my heart was being ripped out. I can't describe how much this hurts. Lexi isn't just my stepdaughter. She's my family. I've been there for her through everything. Her school plays, her bouts of flu, her spelling competitions. I'm the one who stayed up with her when she had nightmares and planned her birthday parties down to the last detail. I've never seen her as anything other than my own daughter. And now I feel like they're taking her away from me, erasing me from her life as if I never mattered. Rick's grandfather George has been a lifeline through all of this. He's the only one in Rick's family who is on my side, and he's been trying to reassure me that things will be okay. But even he is dealing with their incessant attempts to twist the narrative. Rick and Mia have been calling him nonstop, trying to convince him that I brainwashed or manipulated him into excluding Rick from the family trust. They're telling him it's Rick's birthright, and he has no right to take it away from him. George is not giving in, however. He has made it clear to them that his behavior is unacceptable and that he will not reward Rick's betrayal. I don't think they expected him to stand his ground, and now they are desperately trying to make him feel guilty so that he changes his mind. George told me about a call where Mia burst into tears, saying that I was ruining Lexi's life by driving a wedge between her parents. The audacity of that woman, I can't even begin to understand it. In the midst of all this chaos, I realized something. I can't fix this. I can't reason with people who are so selfish, and I can't keep putting myself in situations where I'm treated like the enemy. The only thing I know for sure at the moment is that I am divorcing Rick. I have started to look for a lawyer and to gather all the documentation I will need. It's overwhelming, but I know it's the only way forward. As for the house, there's no way I'm leaving it. It's as much mine as it is his, even more so considering I put up most of the money to buy it. Rick and Mia can play house somewhere else, but it won't be here. I've made that very clear to them both. That said, I'm still lost. I don't know what the future holds, and that terrifies me. I don't know if I'll ever see Lexi again, or if she'll grow up believing the lies they're telling her about me. I don't know how to move on after such a deep betrayal, or how to trust anyone again. Right now, all I can do is move forward one step at a time and hope that I somehow find my way through this mess. Update 2. Hi guys. Some things have happened and let me explain. If I thought that things couldn't get any more complicated after the last update, I was very, very wrong. It's as if every time I think I've hit rock bottom in this nightmare, I discover that there's another level to fall to. A couple of days ago, I ran into Rick's sister at the supermarket. Let's call her Sarah. Before all this, Sarah and I were close, or so I thought. She was one of the first people in Rick's family who really made me feel welcome when we got married. We had long conversations about everything from work stress to family dramas, and she even called me her extra sister at one point. But since the disaster with Rick and Mia, she's been completely silent, not a call, text or anything. When I saw her, my heart sank. Part of me just wanted to turn around and leave, but I couldn't. I needed to at least try. So I approached her, and before she could avoid me, I begged her to talk to me just for a second. She sighed and said something like, "I really don't think this is a good idea," but she didn't leave. That felt like a small victory. I could see that she was angry. Her body language said it all. Arms crossed, avoiding eye contact, the whole thing. I didn't waste any time and tried to explain my side of the story. I told her how I had been there for Lexi, how I stayed at that hospital day and night while Rick was off doing God knows what with Mia. I told her how baffled I was by everything, how much it hurt to be painted as an evil stepmother when all I did was love that little girl as if she were my own. But honestly, I don't think I convinced her. The way things are going, I don't think I'm going to convince anyone. Rick and Mia have spent so much time creating this image of a perfect family that it's easy for people to believe it. And I get it. If you look at it from the outside, it's a simple story. They were the original couple, and I'm the intruder who came in and disrupted everything. That's how they're presenting it, and it's working. People are angry with me because it's easier to believe that narrative than to dig deeper and question what's really going on. And then Sarah dropped a bombshell that left me completely stunned. Apparently, Rick has been saying that I manipulated him into leaving Mia even before we were married. He's weaving this whole narrative that I trapped him, that I took advantage of his supposed vulnerability, and somehow convinced him to abandon his first family. According to him, I'm this manipulative teacher who destroyed his marriage. And now, years later, he suddenly realized the truth. And since he's such a noble guy, he wants to make things right by getting back together with Mia, for Lexi's sake, of course. When Sarah told me this, I was honestly too shocked to speak. I mean, the sheer audacity is mind-blowing. Let's get one thing straight. When I met Rick, he and Mia had already been divorced for over a year. Their relationship had ended a long time ago, and Rick wasn't exactly shy about sharing why. He used to talk nonstop about how toxic their marriage was. He told me stories about how Mia cheated on him and constantly lied about money. And now he's changing the story and acting like I'm some evil seductress who came along and drove him away. It's so absurd it's almost laughable, except there's nothing funny about it because people are actually buying it. Apparently, Rick and Mia are also telling people that I'm trying to force him to stay with me by holding the house hostage. They're saying that I'm using the fact that my name is on the title deed as some kind of leverage to keep him trapped in a marriage he doesn't want. It's like they're rewriting history in real time, and people are just buying it. And the icing on the cake, Rick and Mia have also been dragging George into this mess. They're telling everyone that I've been manipulating him into excluding Rick from the family trust. They claim that I've poisoned George against his own grandson, all because I'm supposedly bitter and seeking revenge. Never mind the fact that George is one of the most independent and sharp-minded people I have ever met. He doesn't need anyone whispering in his ear, least of all me. He made his decision about the trust because of Rick's behavior, pure and simple. But no, in Rick and Mia's version of events, I'm some kind of evil puppet master pulling all the strings. Hearing all this from Sarah was like a punch in the stomach. I couldn't even respond for a moment because I was so shocked by how far Rick and Mia were willing to go to paint me as the villain. I asked Sarah if she really believed all that. She didn't answer me directly, but she said something like, "It's hard to know what to believe right now." That hurt almost as much as the lies themselves. I thought he knew me better. After that conversation, I've been in a kind of spiral. I keep going over everything in my head, wondering how he got to this point. I've always tried to do the right thing, to be a good person, to love the people in my life unconditionally. But now it seems like none of that matters. All it takes is one person with a voice loud enough to turn everyone against you. I've spoken to George about all of this, and he's still on my side. Thank God. He told me not to let them get to me, that their lies will catch up with them eventually. But even he sounds tired. I know that Rick and Mia's constant calls and pleas are wearing him down. He's standing firm on his decision about the trust, but I can tell that this whole situation is taking its toll on him too. As for me, I'm trying to focus on what I can control. I had my first meeting with a lawyer to start the divorce process. It was overwhelming. There is so much to consider, and I feel like I'm constantly on the verge of collapse. But I know it's the only way forward. Rick made his decisions, and now I have to make mine. One thing I am absolutely firm about is the house. I am not going to give it up no matter what. It's not just about the money or the property itself. It's about standing firm and not letting them take everything away from me. They've already taken so much from me. My marriage, my relationship with Lexi, my reputation. I won't let them take this away from me too. But even with all that determination, I'm still lost. I don't know how to rebuild from here. I don't know how to find closure when it seems that this chapter of my life has ended in the most messy and painful way possible. And I don't know how to move on when there is still so much anger, sadness, and betrayal weighing on me. Update 3. Hi guys, sorry for disappearing. It's been a whirlwind, and believe me when I say that a lot has happened. I'm not exaggerating. Between the emotional roller coaster and dealing with the consequences of it all, I barely had time to breathe, let alone update you all. But I'm here now, and I have some important updates to share. The first surprise came out of the blue. A text message from Rick's sister, Sarah. Yes, the same Sarah who practically ignored me and didn't seem to believe my side of things. She sent me a message saying she wanted to talk and that she had something important to share. At first I was skeptical, thinking it might be just another confrontation or some kind of trick. But her tone seemed genuine. She told me that she had gone to visit Lexi, my stepdaughter, in hospital. And during their time together, Lexi had opened up about how much she missed me. According to Sarah, Lexi burst into tears and kept saying how unfair it was that I was no longer around. Lexi told her that I had always been there for her, and she hated that I wasn't there now when she needed me most. Hearing that broke me. I started crying right there because it felt like a validation of everything I had been feeling. All this time, I had been portrayed as this villain. But for Lexi, I was still her mom, the one who cared about her when no one else did. Sarah told me that that moment made her realize how much damage Rick and Mia's actions had caused, not only to me but also to Lexi. She apologized for not believing me before and said she wanted to make it up to me. She even arranged for me to visit Lexi in the hospital the next day. Seeing Lexi again after so long was like a weight having been lifted. She lit up when she saw me. We both cried as we hugged each other. She told me she missed me so much and hated how everyone was stopping her from seeing me. It was such an emotional moment, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever happens with Rick and Mia, I know I won't give up on Lexi. She's my daughter in every way that matters, and no one can take that away from us. But the real turning point came a few days later when George, Rick's grandfather, decided it was time for a final confrontation. He organized a meeting at his house and invited everyone involved: Rick, Mia, their parents, Sarah, and surprise, even me. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I trusted George enough to show up. When I walked in, the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The moment Rick and Mia saw me, they went into full-blown crisis mode. They started shouting about how I had no right to be there, and Mia even hurled insults at me that I'm not even going to repeat here. But George wasn't going to tolerate it. He silenced them immediately and made it clear that there would be no drama in his house. He said that this meeting was to clear things up once and for all, and that everyone would listen or they could leave. That silenced Rick and Mia, at least for a moment. Then came the big announcement. George declared that the trust, which had originally named Rick as beneficiary, would now be reserved entirely for Lexi. The room went silent for a second before Rick spoke, asking if that meant he would be the trustee. I think he was trying to hide his disappointment, still hoping he could control the money in some way. But George dropped another bombshell. The trustee would not be Rick. It would be Sarah. I could practically see the blood draining from Rick's face. He started yelling at Sarah, accusing her of plotting against him, and claiming that this was all part of some scheme that she and I had planned together. Sarah, to her credit, didn't take the bait. She calmly told him that this wasn't about him. It was about Lexi and making sure her future was secure. George backed her up by saying that Rick's behavior had shown that he wasn't responsible enough to manage the trust, and that this was the best decision for Lexi's well-being. The drama didn't stop there. I took the opportunity to address Rick directly, telling him that no matter what problems we had, he had no right to keep me away from Lexi. I made it clear that I would fight tooth and nail if he ever tried to take me out of her life again. He didn't say much in response, probably because George was sitting right there, watching him like a hawk. Rick may not agree with his grandfather's decisions, but he's smart enough to know that George is a man of influence. Even if Rick no longer receives money from him, he still needs George's connections and support to some extent. As for the divorce, things are finally moving forward. My lawyer has been incredible, guiding me through the process and helping me stay focused on what matters. One of the biggest points of contention was, of course, the house. Initially, I was determined to keep it, but after some long conversations with my lawyer, I realized it might not be worth the trouble. My lawyer suggested that we sell the house and divide the proceeds, which obviously seemed the simplest way to end this chapter. When my lawyer presented the proposal to Rick, I was bracing myself for another fight, but to my surprise, he agreed without much resistance. So, I guess this is where we are now. The house will be sold, the divorce finalized soon, and Lexi's future is secure thanks to George and Sarah. It's not the ending I imagined when I married Rick, but it's a resolution I can live with. There is still a lot of healing to do, and I know it will take time to rebuild my life. But for the first time in weeks, I feel like I can finally see a way forward. To everyone who has been offering support, thank you. Your words of encouragement have meant more to me than I can express. I will continue to fight for what is right, for myself and for Lexi. Whatever happens next, I think I'll be okay.